Hey everyone, Sparrow here. Welcome back to True North Sanctuary, where today we are finishing up the cold dome with the addition of a gray seal habitat that extends outwards and down a slight slope from the building to the plaza we built during the aviary compilation episode. There will be plenty of terrain work, some backstage additions, and we will also be setting the building into the surrounding area with a plaza of its own. So first things first, we need to figure out how much of this habitat is going to be land and how much of it is going to be water. I'd like to have enough room for about 5 to 6 seals in here, plus extra, since the Arctic zone is sort of the pinnacle of the sanctuary, the latest and most modern addition, and therefore probably also the section with the most spacious and up-to-date habitats. Gray seals spend a lot of time in the water, so I do want there to be lots of space for them to swim around in. They can hold their breath for up to 16 minutes underwater, though they'll normally dive down for about 5 to 10 minutes at a time. We won't be making the pool super deep, but definitely deep enough to have a fish feeder at the bottom. So unfortunately my initial calculations were wrong, and I later had to go back and make this part even deeper. But for now, we'll just go with what's on screen. The plan here is to have the outdoor and indoor pools connected with a door through which the seals can swim through. I'm still thinking about where to place an implied keeper door so keepers also have access to the outdoor portion, but if all else fails, maybe they need to dive down into the pool along with the seals. That would certainly be a lot of fun. Though I have tried diving with a tank before, and I will say that's not for me. I will stick to scuba diving, but if you're working with seals, there's a chance you're a lot less scared of it than I am. Working on the indoor portion of the pool now, going in with the plaster walls to give it that man-made feel. I started with the panels before deciding I wanted the curved wall pieces, so I ended up going back and changing the panels to the grid pieces to make sure all of that lined up together nicely. It was super annoying rotating that into place after the fact, so there will be a jump cut shortly to after that happens. Also, I do apologize if you hear me coughing during the recording or my voice sounds off. I am a bit sick. It's that time of year. There's a respiratory virus and a stomach flu going around at the moment, and I was unlucky enough to catch both at the same time. I'm getting better now, and it was kind of inevitable since I am a teacher and often working with small children. Getting sick during flu season is just part of that, I feel. Onto the edges of the pool. I used these mud wall panels to help the edge of the pool sit into the terrain a little bit better. I used this same trick on the penguin habitat last week and found the texture of the mud walls blends in nicely with the tundra rocks that will be scattered around the enclosure. Though I couldn't have too many, as the traversable terrain of the gray seals is ridiculous and even a tiny rock can block their movement, so I really struggled with making the indoor portion of the habitat look nice but still usable by the seals. I was warned by a friend that building for the gray seal is pretty annoying, and I didn't believe her, but now, Kate, you were totally correct. I'm not sure why I doubted the annoyance that is traversable terrain. And by the way, if you haven't checked out her channel, I will link it in the top corner. She has an awesome series about planning your zoo if you're stuck on that part of the building process, as well as a fantastic series she is currently working on. What we are currently working on with the gray seals is the backstage portion where the keepers have access to the seals, where they can feed them, check on their medicinal needs, etc. I do think that is something that's missing from Planet Zoo. The animal care portion is kind of lacking. Whenever I go to my local zoo, they have an awesome seal show, northern fur seals specifically, where they show off various tricks they've been taught, but what's interesting about these tricks is that they're behaviors that allow the keepers to take better care of them. So for example, the seals will be taught to lay flat, and that aids the keepers in checking them over for any injuries or bumps, or they'll teach the seals to open their mouths wide so the keepers can check on their teeth. Something like that would be a very cool addition to this game. I'm not the biggest fan of animal shows just for the sake of animal shows, but in this context it educates guests about how the animals are taken care of, and that's super cool in my books. Just going to finish up the pool with this slanted portion at the bottom to give it a slightly less boxy feel, a little bit safer for the animals, and also easier to clean as the grime doesn't get into the 90-degree angle at the bottom of the pool where the walls meet the floor. And next, because I was not feeling well and totally forgot to hit the record button, here is our first look at the seal resting on her little island, then the rockwork coming in, little ditch behind the enclosure that I'll talk about a little bit later, addition of underwater rocks and foliage, and some reeds to line the edges and give a bit of color. I did also add some logs here and there to add some more interest. Usually I forget to do this until the very end, which is unfortunate because logs and stumps actually add a lot of character to an enclosure. For the gray seals, it adds some more obstacles for them to swim around underwater, but for climbing animals it's great because they can walk all over it, and even for animals that aren't tagged as climbing, they'll still jump up onto logs and perch or walk across them, which is fun to see. Back to the backstage, I got a few comments last time that you enjoyed seeing the custom fencing going in, so here is a look at the custom mesh fence and gate in the seal area. Started with some mesh and the metal beams as usual, just measuring out the distance from wall to wall, and then I delete one of the mesh panels so that I can create a sliding door that will go there instead. For sliding doors, I like to use the wagon wheels or the LED tube caps to give the illusion of wheels. At the top, I used one of the bracket pieces this time, I believe, but I'm also a big fan of using the New World fence posts, or I recently also discovered the conservation gutter pieces as a means of creating the illusion of sliding doors thanks to Gunther of Gunther's Gaming, so do make sure to check out his channel as well, which I'll link in the top corner. Just resizing the door slightly so it doesn't look like it's hitting the floor or ceiling as it moves, and recoloring certain pieces to a light blue to fit in with the icy motif of this building. I do also like using the regular gutter pieces to create tracks in the floor along which the wheels will slide. Just a hint of realism, making sure the door stays in place. So yes, those are those bracket pieces up there at the top. And then our gutter pieces along the floor here. Ah yes, the dreaded rework. I started placing the enrichment items and quickly realized that the fish feeder is not deep enough. Usually it will flatten the terrain around it, and when I first placed it, it did not do that, which told me that it wasn't deep enough. So I had to fiddle around with the terrain quite a bit, and unfortunately, since I'd already placed a bunch of rocks and foliage, those also had to be replaced around the habitat. But in the end, I think it actually gave the seals more room to roam in the water, which I'm definitely not against, while still giving them some land area in the outdoor portion. In the wild, gray seals will haul out, as it's called, onto land between hunting trips, and during the breeding season they'll do this in much larger groups to areas called rookeries. So I wanted the land portion here to be large enough to support maybe 2 to 3 seals, though I was using the female seal to measure, and males can easily be up to twice their size, so I guess we'll find out. And the moment of truth. Yes, it finally works. We're going to throw some gates into the holes we've left in the walls, so it looks like the different pools can be closed off from each other if necessary. To do this again, just using some mesh and metal beams, plus the gutter pieces at the top to make it look like there's a slot the gate slides in and out of. Might need to add some wires and switches to make it look like they can be opened and closed as well. Looks pretty simple, yes? Wrong. Apparently, this blocks the seal's traversable terrain because, again, it's annoying. But with a little tweaking, including reworking the exterior wall here, it did work, and the seal was able to get through to all parts of the enclosure. While that happens, let's chat about that ditch behind the enclosure that I mentioned earlier. The reason for it is to separate this enclosure from the one next to it, which is going to be the polar bear. Rather than using a fence, I wanted to create a more natural barrier so that we get a predator and prey effect from the viewing area. By the time the polar bear enclosure is done, guests should be able to look at the gray seal island in the middle of the enclosure, and with a bit of luck, maybe see the silhouette of a polar bear behind it in the distance. The seals are obviously safe because they can't climb the rocks and fall into the ditch, and the polar bear will have some hot wire on its side to deter it from getting too close to the ditch, keeping it safe. And this way they are separated from each other, but we still get the sightlines and education that comes out of them. And now, a short break to watch our cute seal take a swim. To finish off the interior, I had to figure out what to do with these walls because they didn't quite meet the curved slope of the ceiling, and I went through many iterations, including just adding concrete all the way up, but that just looked too plain and also collided with the support struts. So I instead tried some art shapes to mimic the front of the building, but that also didn't feel quite right. I settled for lining the entire edge of the concrete wall with a metal beam piece, and then added beams going up to the ceiling to provide extra support. But that still looked a little bit too plain, so I took to the internet and did some research about gray seals and found a bunch of information about fishing and how gray seals were actually considered pests by fishermen. So I used the rough rope piece to create these lines hanging in between the posts, and then from these lines I could have the Oceania net pieces hanging down. Not only does it fill the space, it also makes for a pretty great educational prop. And with the building finally done, we can take a look at the outdoor plaza. This was my first time doing something like this with implied guest access. A lot of this is just for show, but I think it looks quite good in the end. I'm honestly not sure how other builders make fully functioning plazas like this, or how some builders will cover every inch of their paths with building pieces, regardless of whether they're sloped, stairs, whatever, but I aspire to be able to do that one day. Today is not that day, but for a first try, I think it turned out nicely. I used the plaster pieces because there is such a wide variety of off-grid pieces like this plaster segment that I used to create the stairs. Eyeballed the distances, not too worried about making it perfect, and it's not like guests will be using this anyway. They will, however, have access up the ramp on the side nearest the gray seal habitat. Just making sure I like the sightlines from the walkway between the Arctic fox and snowy owl enclosures. These stairs are not entirely centered with the door of the cold dome, but I think that works alright. It's not a symmetrical building because of the addition of the penguin backstage, so it'll work. And then I battled with the paths to make sure guests have access to the building interior. Putting up some railings along the edges of the plaza, I thought about creating my own, but these aquatic railings really do fit the vibe of the building. The color of the metal is icy and cool to match, and the shape is quite nice, kind of like a wave crashing off of the plaza because of the curve at the top. That's the main reason why I wanted them to face out rather than in. Also gives a little bit more room for guests to mingle about on the patios, which will have some tables and umbrellas for shade. To line the edge of the path and add a more natural element to the plaza, we'll be creating planters using the same plaster segment as the front stairs, making sure that's touching the edge of the path and following its slope where it needs to. Then filling each garden bed with mulch and a limited selection of plants, in this case the campion moss and diamond leaf willow, which are some of the few plants we have in Planet Zoo found in the Arctic tundra. Over on the other side, we need something to block off the view of the Arctic fox backstage, so these tall cypress trees worked super well for that. This is a well-maintained and likely more recently planted garden bed, so they are planted in equal distances from each other but still rotated to make sure they don't look copy-pasted. So here is the first peek at the completed Climate Initiative Cold Dome. We're just gonna walk up to the front here to see the main entrance. There. And then we have our patios on either side. But we're actually gonna start our tour over with the penguin backstage area, and then we'll work our way over. So up that way we have our whooping crane habitat. And then over here we have a ramp that guests could also technically use. It's just not connected to the doorway, so they won't be using it. But this does have staff access to the penguin backstage. So as we make our way in here, we immediately have a little kitchen. And then we also have the indoor pool area for our penguins with some storage back in the corner there. And then through here we have our penguin habitat. So there are 5 of them in here. We have 2 males, Liam and Pingu, and 3 females, Gloria, Frosty, and Glacier. So this is what the penguins see on the inside of the cold dome. Nice little habitat for them. So for here we have some tables that guests could sit at. We have a view of the snowy owl aviary and the Arctic fox shack. And then through here we can enter the cold dome. I also put the name right underneath the door. We walk through, we are greeted by statues of our penguin and our gray seal. Let's take a look at the penguin habitat first. So plenty of views up here of kind of that land area. And then as we descend below water level, we can see them swimming about, if there's any of them actually swimming right now. Doesn't look like it. Looks like they're all on land over there. They're huddled up together, as penguins do. And then we can also catch a glimpse into the backstage area over there. Behind us, we have a bunch of signage and then some more penguin statues. Just some educational things. So then as we round this bend, this wall is empty for a reason, which we'll discover next episode. But as we round the corner here, we have our gray seal backstage. So we can peek through the window into kind of their sleeping area and the little indoor pool here. Of course, we have a bunch of backstage stuff there as well. If we go through this door, we'll get a little bit of a better look at the backstage sliding door, for example. And then we do also have the gate over there that is hooked up by wire all the way to these switches over here. And then we of course can also see the nets up top, and then the educational signage over here talking about fishing and how seals are considered pests by some fishermen. And then as we walk closer to these viewing windows, we get a good look at their indoor pool. Added some decor on the walls just to make it a little bit less empty. Oh, and we have one of our seals in here too. I don't know if that's the male or the female. The male is Bubbles and the female is Sandy. Looks like he's headed outside, just like us. So we're gonna make our way over there. And then we get our first look at the outdoor enclosure. Your little island and plenty of room to swim around in. I love when they hang out like this, just floating, not a care in the world. So cute. Adorable. And then from here we get a quite good view of not only the seals but the entire cold dome in the background there. Look at this guy. He is chonky. Thank you so much for watching. Let me know what you think of the Climate Initiative funded Cold Dome, the newest and most modern addition to True North Sanctuary. And of course, leave me a like if you liked the content. It really helps me out and keeps me going. As always, thank you for stopping by, and I will see you next time. Bye.